for delivering sustainable, efficient solutions. By working closely with clients, Lanco Group is able to meet the complex infrastructure requirements for residential, commercial and industrial developments on time, on budget. Find out more at lancogroup.com.au. Lanco Group, your business partner for engineering solutions.
Maloney takes. It's in! It's Ben Watson! It's Ben Watson for Wigan Athletic! They've surely won the FA Cup! For Dave Whelan, for Roberto Martinez! You just cannot write scripts like this! Maloney takes. It's in! It's Ben Watson! It's Ben Watson for Wigan Athletic! They've surely won the FA Cup! For Dave Whelan, for Roberto Martinez! You just cannot write scripts like this!
Great sporting nation who has yet to embrace fully the world's greatest game, and for so long of trying to have the game accepted. When I'm up to the big football field in the sky, I just want people just to remember I told you so.
And suddenly the complexion of the game changes. Let's hope it doesn't, but this is the best period for Iran in the match. Danger for Australia.
Just feel for them, not just the boys, they are representative of so many people who make this game their life. It's just, I can't say anything.
Especially as they have the impetus. Aloisi, Cahill, Tim Cahill, got it again! What a goal by Tim Cahill! 2-1 Australia! Oh, it's a wonderful moment in Kaiserslautern! And Tim Cahill has come off the bench and maybe won the match for the Socceroos.
You're listening to FNR, Football Nation Radio.
You're listening to the State of Our Football Nation on FNR. George Danikian and Lachlan Flanagan, and that little clip that allows us to hear Johnny Warren's voice takes me back to the early days of SBS when he and Les on a regular basis would regale us with stories and reminders of how important it was to reach and stretch ourselves. And, this last campaign tested everybody's patience and ultimately delivered in the most amazing fashion. And to see Redmayne, do something that we had seen him do two or three other times. And I remember one time seeing him doing it in an A-League game and thinking to myself, Andrew Redmayne, what are you doing? Well, he outmanoeuvred and he got those Peruvians uncomfortable. And that was enough. And at that elite level, I suppose the last thing they were expecting was to see anyone playing heebie-jeebies or attempting to create a whole new dance form during an international match.
Well, do you want to know something really funny about that, George?
Go.
Because I think there was some sort of discussion and speculation after it all happened. Is this going to filter through, or are other people going to be inspired by this manoeuvre?
Yeah.
And funnily enough, one of our beloved associate clubs here on Football Nation Radio, Preston Lions, actually conceded a penalty in stoppage time on Friday night at BT Connor Reserve. And Chris Theodorides, the former Heidelberg United stopper, he was doing the full works, the full Monty,
the full Redmayne.
Yeah, the only thing he didn't do was throw away the water bottle because it wasn't
did he
a
make the
shootout.
save?
He did.
Oh,
So
wow.
he walked up to the penalty taker. He delayed as long as he possibly could. He probably added on a minute and a half to the whole process.
Dear.
And he was doing the dancing on the line, and he made the save.
Well, there you go. Andrew Redmayne. Long may that impression and that wonderful, performance resonate. So clearly it's working in parts of the NPL competition in Victoria.
Indeed it is.
Next time we get a chance to speak to Andrew Redmayne, and I hope it is soon, I want to test him because I want to know who put it in his head to start doing that, because I have seen it before. He did it. Was it a couple of years ago in a A-League game where he just started dancing around, not quite as elaborately as he did in the international.
Yeah, it was against Perth Glory.
Was it against Perth Glory?
In the penalty shootout final, he saved off Brendan Santalab.
There you go. So we weren't being delusional.
No. Well, I wonder, George, how those penalty antics might be potentially received next season with some of the possible European imports that are coming in.
Yeah, that's interesting.
The A-League
that's interesting.
Because, of course, the big headline was that Nani is on the verge of signing up.
Nani, there's even talk that Cesc Fabregas, who you'd know a little bit more about because being an Arsenal boy.
Better or for worse.
What would you make of Cesc Fabregas coming to Australia to play, I don't know, limited minutes in the A-League or even extended minutes in the A-League?
I mean, I feel very conflicted on the concept of, well, not on Cesc Fabregas specifically, but on the concept of the sort of marquee strategy as a whole. I wonder
what's wrong with the marquee.
Well, I just wonder if it's a good long-term plan. I have no doubt.
It's never been a long-term plan. It's always been an opportunity to pump the game up. It's like doing ads. Yeah, we push certain promotional ads for a specific reason, to alert, to enlighten, to open people's minds up to, oh my God, that's happening. You don't think Bunnings would be spending the enormous amounts of money, or Coca-Cola or anybody else, if those ads didn't work. Well, those ads are the marquee players. When Emil Heskey came in those opening games, some of the crowds that we saw attending at their original matches were pretty good. In fact, we saw Sturridge, who had the most abysmal season on the field, deliver a full crowd at their first home game in Perth.
But then I just wonder how many of those people will continue to turn up. But
had he had a season that would be, look, I put it to you that had Daniel Sturridge been able to stay on the pitch long enough to play some of the football that he's certainly capable of playing, right? Maybe not for as long as he did when he was in his heyday for some of the biggest clubs in the EPL. You would have been seeing quite a few. When David Villa came and spent a few weeks at Melbourne City, I can tell you the buzz around the city and around the league was very exciting. And what people don't readily appreciate, he was meant to stay along with Frank Lampard for 10 games. But a whole series of things behind the scenes conspired to make sure that they never saw 10 games in the A-League. Lampard was snatched up by Manchester City because of his being an English player, and they needed to balance their English player books, which is something that the EPL demands, which is fine. But that meant having to draw one of their players from New York.
Yes.
And the two that were there, one was Frank Lampard, the other one was Villa. So Villa, of course, alerted then that he's lost Frank Lampard, was then told, you better come home early because you're now the only one we have to promote the game in New York. Well, and that was the whole point of the exercise initially.
And it's funny, George, I look, as much as I might have my reservations with the strategy from a long-term perspective, I am all for Cesc Fabregas joining because I think he could have a similar impact to Sturridge. I mean, Liverpool probably are the biggest supported club in Australia. Liverpool players are going to have
when you reflect on that fabulous turnout that Victory played Liverpool at the MCG. When you consider that was just an exhibition, and more people turned out for that exhibition, which featured Liverpool, than was in the biggest game of the season at the MCG, which is notoriously the grand final of the AFL every year. that year, that crowd was the number one crowd to attend anything in the MCG. That tells you an awful lot, doesn't it?
Exactly. And if Liverpool fans are first, then Arsenal fans are probably
second best?
Probably second or third on the list, I would say.
I would have thought maybe Manchester United might shade you a little.
Yeah, no, I would say third, but that's still a significant following. And let's not forget, because one of the areas that Cesc has been mooted to move to is New South Wales. When they played in 2017, Arsenal against Western Sydney and Sydney, I think there was the ANZ Stadium was sold out.
Fabregas also has the Barcelona link.
Yes.
So there'd be a lot of Barca fans who saw Barca recently would have gone, oh, wow. Of course. So they'd be energised by that.
And I think for me...
And that's the point of a marquee.
Exactly. And I think for me as well, unlike Daniel Sturridge, who maybe... You know, the physical conditioning of Daniel Sturridge is a bit more important for the kind of player that he is. But Cesc Fabregas
he needs to be explosive.
Is a technically brilliant midfielder. He doesn't need to be running and sprinting all the time. He can do everything from the centre circle pretty much.
Correct.
And I think a player, Cesc Fabregas is the kind of player that Australian football doesn't have enough of. So I can see him coming in and not just impressing, but actually starting the conversation about what do we actually do to create more midfielders that can do that sort of
Charlie
thing.
Austin coming to Brisbane Roar. What do you make of that?
Well, I really like it because Charlie Austin...
Combative?
Yes. I mean, the fundamental thing for me is how he actually fits in to Brisbane, because Brisbane suffered all of last season. They had plenty of promise for me. Plenty of young players came through and impressed.
Interestingly, Josh Parrish early on last year put them in that elite they're going to be, the team that makes the biggest moves all year. And he said to me halfway through the season, "Whoops, I think I got it wrong."
I'm willing
I
to
don't think it was a case of he got it wrong. They had, as you say, some challenges that they didn't see coming, and it cruelled their competitive spirit that particular year.
Yeah, of course. And look, in terms of the striking stocks, let's not forget they are working off a very low base. Obviously, Juan Lezcano was there last year, didn't do a particularly good job, but Charlie Austin is really, really good hold-up play sort of striker. And I think if he's coming in to do that sort of job at Brisbane Roar, and he seems... The thing that I actually do like about it is he actually seems very keen on the idea of being in Australia. Like, let's not forget that he had offers from other clubs in the Championship, other clubs in League One. He could very easily have stayed comfortable, stayed put, but he actually wants to come to Australia. And that gives me more hope that he actually has something to provide, because he's not just coming here for easy money and a holiday, because if he wanted easy money, he would have stayed where he was.
Correct.
So he's come down to Brisbane, who, let's not forget, are not exactly a club at the moment with significant financial means. So I think it's really endearing that he's choosing not to play for the money and to come down to Brisbane for a challenge for something different.
I think the climate's going to appeal to him enormously. I think the lifestyle's certainly going to fit him like a glove.
Absolutely.
And I'll tell you what, if you reflect on the players that Brisbane Roar lost last year, a couple of them went to Western United and did awfully well, did they not?
Indeed, they did.
The goalkeeper, Jamie Young, and that smart young forward who has got a bit about him. Just remind me his name.
From Brisbane?
From Brisbane Roar.
Luke Ivanovic?
No, not Ivanovic. The double barrel name.
Oh, Wenzel Halls.
Wenzel Halls,
of course.
Again, yes, he went from there as a promising young striker, to Western to give them that real drive. And every time I saw him play throughout this past season, Wenzel Hall was combative, was there, and would pressure all he could. Yeah? Even if he mightn't score, and he did score, even if he wasn't scoring in the numbers that some people imagined he would, he certainly put himself about, which all you can ask of young players.
Absolutely.
And I think Johnny Aloisi and that whole training squad at Western United gave him the sort of confidence to continue to grow. And by the grand final, that was a pretty exciting, spearheaded unit that they had at the front, which gave Melbourne City enormous troubles for the entire game.
And I'm actually glad you've brought up Western United as well, because, there are sort of... It looks as though Alex Prijovic might be on the outer, might be heading out. And because he signed quite a long deal at Western United, if he does indeed move on, as some are suggesting, Western United are odds on to pick up a pretty handsome transfer fee for him.
Correct.
Charlie Austin has also been signed to a multi-year deal by Brisbane. There's not a reason to suggest that if he does have the one season, even if he doesn't enjoy it quite as much as he's expecting, there's nothing to suggest that Brisbane couldn't also potentially recoup a transfer fee for a player who comes in, does a good job, and maybe attracts the interest of India or a Southeast Asian league or something like that. So I think that's a pretty good deal, as opposed to someone who's upper 30s and you can't get any return on investment.
No, touche. What I was going to say to you, there have been an awful lot of exciting announcements this week. We've seen 10 and Paramount Plus show us that there are some big changes. We've had Beverly McGarvey at a recent luncheon talk about, yes, they've taken on board some of the challenges and some of the problems that have beset both the app and their broadcasting schedule. Everyone understands what transpired. For those that don't, well, we can tell you yet again that we're not making excuses, but COVID did play a principal role in curtailing much of the early development and preparation work for both 10 and Paramount Plus. And the now Australia Cup was seriously compromised last season. I can remember speaking to one of their major producers who said to me, we want to get our teams out there, but we can't move. We're not allowed out of the state. We can't get into this state. So there were things there that compromised the entire competition of both what was the FFA Cup and eventually the A-League, whether it was the A-League men's, A-League women's. So a lot of things didn't work out. We've finished that season. Now we've got some clear air. The APL, the new Australian Professionals Leagues, have now given us a full program for next season. And that suggests, as you touched on, an enlarged and extended A-League women's, which is just awesome. But importantly too, for the A-League men's, an opportunity now to see how the APL can get up and go and do its stuff without having to endure any other challenges. Again, last year, they were in the... For much of that year, it was all, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, we're still hamstrung, we've still got FA commitments here. Now that's all gone. It's all been tidied up. And I want to hear from people like, for example, Stuart Hodge, who's going to be our guest very shortly on FNR, to talk to us about some of the excitement that's been generated over the last few days alone with the program release of the Australia Cup, which is the new FFA Cup competition that is nationwide, and that is super exciting. And I want to hear from the CEO of New South Wales Football to say to us, we're excited. And did I mention also that the new program suggests there's going to be a national second division in the wind? Isn't that exciting?
Yes, 100%. That is exciting. Yeah. Look, I'm glad you bring up Stuart, because he does join us now, and we get a chance to talk about that clear air for the A-League men's and also the A-League women's,
and what it means for New South Wales and all the lower tier clubs.
Well, Stuart, welcome to you. You join us at a very exciting time for the game.
Yeah, thanks very much for having me. I think we were all glued to the draw last night to see how it came out. And I thought, look, with it being an open draw for the first time, I thought it really made it such a special occasion. And it's fantastic to see just a completely open draw. Everybody from around the country, no matter whether you're from around the A-League or playing a state league competition, or playing in a state league competition, or in the case of Wollongong United, playing in a local association comp, you could draw anybody. I thought that was a really exciting component to last night's draw.
It was super exciting because, as you touched on, there were so many things that people were sitting on their hands waiting to see how it would eventuate, how it would roll out. And it made an impact, did it not?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, in previous years where, there were zones where clubs were drawn into certain zones, so you were anticipating, two New South Wales teams being drawn against each other. And I remember, in years gone by, you'd see two clubs that just played each other in an NPL competition and drawing each other again in the Australia Cup. And while there's special occasions, you do want to play against clubs that you don't normally play against. And to see the draw last night and how open it was and how exciting it was to be able to see clubs being drawn against, rivals from Victoria and New South Wales, or clubs from Queensland, having trouble with WA, things like that. I think it's fantastic, and it's going to be such a great experience for those players.
Stuart, does this more work for you?
Look, we got a few home games in New South Wales, so we'll be there helping out the clubs, of course. But we'd rather them be playing at home than going on the road. We want them to have that home field advantage, and it's going to be terrific to see a club like Wollongong United being able to host Green Gully. It's been such a fairy tale run for Wollongong United to get through. They're a great team in the Illawarra Premier League, and they've done the region very proud. And for them to be able to host a match against a strong club from the NPL in Victoria, it's going to be a real test for them. But, they've overcome clubs like Blacktown City to get this far. So why not? Why not see them continue the fairy tale run?
Well, Stuart, it's not the only Wollongong, obviously the most spectacular of the fairy tale runs, but what's really intrigued me about New South Wales, particularly compared to Victorian teams who've made the national rounds, is that there is so much representation from outside the top flight. Obviously, you have Wollongong in the Illawarra Premier League, but you've also got a club like Bonnyrigg and Northwest Sydney who are playing in the NPL League One as well. So
and they're seasoned clubs, what people don't readily appreciate, and Stuart will tell you, they're really seasoned clubs. They've seen some terrific times. They've seen some terrific squads. And here's an opportunity to flex their muscle, isn't it?
Well, I mean, that just must speak to the strength of the competition at all levels in New South Wales as well.
Yeah, it does. I mean, as I mentioned, we saw, Wollongong knocking out NPL clubs, from the Illawarra Premier League. And as you said, only one club from NPL, being Sydney United, made it through out of the four clubs. Which does demonstrate the strength of the second division that we have in New South Wales in terms of League One. And as George said, Bonnyrigg has such a storied history, and NWS Spirit are doing such a great job with youth development and the players coming through there, and they're challenging for promotion to come up into NPL next year. So we've got some clubs in some really good form coming into this competition, and hopefully they continue it through in the round of 32.
We're talking to the CEO of New South Wales Football, Stuart Hodge. Stuart, what was the highlight for you last night?
Look, I think for me, Wollongong United, the first association club to make it to the round of 32, and I think it's such a tribute to them and the hard work that they put in. As we've watched this competition progress, we have seen clubs from, maybe a second tier of a state league competition, but to see a club, from an association football competition make it all the way through to the round of 32. I used to talk about maybe we should seed our competitions to ensure that an association club makes the round of 32 as they used to with the FFA Cup. Ensure that a state league club made it through to the semi-finals.
Yep.
I was sort of saying, how do we get an association club through? Because it is such a wonderful story.
Oh, it is.
And in the end, we didn't have to do it. They earned themselves. So good on them.
What you're saying is we didn't have to fix the books or set things up in order to make it happen. It actually has happened because of the good work and the skill and the fire that these clubs now feel is within them. I love, for me, the Australia Cup. And I've got to say, what was the FFA Cup was the most exciting innovation in the game for a long time. Because for a great many great clubs of the past, they had been left behind or left out of what was the new A-League. And that's not a nice place to be. The last thing you want is to be like a shag on a rock, left behind, never given an opportunity to compete. And I can remember the old schoolyards in my early days before I could speak any English. I can remember feeling like this, not an outcast, but very definitely an outsider. And the last thing you want in our game, which is the world game, is to ever feel like an outsider. So here we have a tremendous competition, and it's got a brand new name, which I think is only right, the Australia Cup, because that's what we're playing for, the right to make it to the very top. And we've added some juicy prizes at the very top of the Australia Cup, which makes it even more exciting, Stuart.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll have to see if some clubs can meet the criteria to go into the Asian Champions League. Wouldn't that be amazing?
But that's the sort of headache you want to have.
Well, I always sort of hit, Wollongong United, Wynn Stadium is a great stadium down in Wollongong.
Super stadium.
We certainly could see them playing there. But you're right, it's wonderful to see all these clubs on the national stage again last night. And so much interest in this competition. And, I really love the round of 32. So many matches, so many chances for upsets. Interestingly enough, several matches where A-League clubs have drawn against each other, which means I think this competition is really going to be wide open. I think there's a very good chance that state league clubs can go a long way in this competition. I think it's going to be very exciting to watch it unfold.
Stuart, not to detract from the focus of the conversation, which is I'm not going to be dampening Stuart's hopes at all, but I don't want to take away from the Australia Cup chat wherever possible. But I've got to talk about your top flight NPL in New South Wales because it is just an incredible season that is going on over there. Obviously, United are top of the table at the moment, but 4 points separating first all the way down to sixth. It's a crazy year you guys are having up north. We're very envious of you here in Victoria.
See what a little incentive does. Stuart will tell you about that. Incentive means an awful lot.
We have the ladder for the men's and women's competitions in our reception, and I can tell you every Monday morning there's a lot of change going on with that ladder. I mean, you can be in first, lose a game, and drop fifth.
Wow!
I mean, it's so close. It is as close as we've ever seen. And really, I mean, try and pick a winner from here right now. It's almost impossible. It's been such an amazing season. Clubs have been up and down, and 1 week to the next, you really don't know who's going to win, and it's making for some fabulous football.
Stuart, tell me something. Are we still seeing great numbers of young boys and girls wanting to play the game?
Oh, absolutely. By far, we are still the most popular team participation sport. Out of COVID, you get anecdotal feedback from some other sports that they've, some people have moved away from the game, and you understand that COVID has had an impact. But certainly, in football, last year we saw our numbers increase despite the pandemic, despite COVID. And I think it's because it really is a sport for all, and it's a sport that it's very easy to get into. People love playing, and we're actually seeing seniors come back into the sport too. That was something that was really interesting coming out of the sort of lockdowns. That people wanted to play. It was almost like, I've realised, I've been stuck at home, and I miss getting out, and I miss playing sport, and I want to get back into football. So we've seen that, and obviously off the back of the Women's World Cup too, there's an increase in interest in the women's game, and a lot more females wanting to play the sport, which is fantastic. And we secured recently a $10 million legacy fund with the New South Wales government to support initiatives to support women's football, facilities, programs, scholarships, those sort of things. So there's some wonderful opportunities to be involved with the game at the moment.
But it's great to hear that sort of interest in playing the game has sustained throughout the difficulty of the past 2 years. And I think especially with that Women's World Cup coming up, and I think people are even underestimating still how much of a boost that could stand to be for participation numbers and things like that. But one thing that we have seen change here in Victoria, Stuart, and I'm interested to see what the situation's been like in New South Wales, is that we have had quite a drop-off in numbers of referees over the course of the pandemic. Refereeing assignments have been a real challenge for the Federation here in Victoria. I'm curious to know whether that's a trend that you guys have experienced in New South Wales as well, or just generally how the health of the referee team is up north.
Yeah, look, I think for us it's been a little bit of a different issue. We've seen referee numbers maintained, but the availability rate has been an issue. We had such terrible weather to start the season. We talked about the impact of the last few years. We had drought, bushfire, pandemics, and everyone was just hoping for a clear runway into this season to be able to enjoy their football, and we just got hit with terrible weather for an extended period of time. There were weeks where some competitions had played 3 out of 12 rounds and things like that, and so the availability of referees became a bit of an issue because partly because of the weather and the difficult conditions for matches that were being played. And then when the weather was clear, it was rare, so people probably wanted to get out and enjoy the weather. And so that's been a bit of a challenge for us, but we have seen it sort of stabilise recently, and there's been plenty of catch-up games, which again puts the pressure on referee numbers, because with losing so many matches during the season, there's double headers, there's matches on weeknights, and so again that does stretch the availability of referees.
You're listening to State of Our Football Nation on FNR. George Denikian along with Lockie Flanagan, and we're talking to the CEO of Football New South Wales, Stuart Hodge. Stuart, I need to ask, and I want to know. Are we getting the sort of support from government, whether it's federal and state, that the game deserves, especially with an international event the size of the Women's World Cup coming to us next year?
I think the governments are putting a lot of support into the Women's World Cup, and the key is going to be capitalising on that with legacy, as I mentioned earlier. Yeah. We received.
You mentioned 10 million. 10 million. I'd like to see that 30 million or 50 million. The AFL. The reason I say that is because the AFL in Victoria has managed to get out of the state government something like $200 million to renovate its own ground, Marvel Stadium, which is quite an extraordinary business deal if you can get it. Stuart. So I thought when I heard 10, I thought, no, we've got to go back and ask for more. But you know what I'm talking about. You talked about the weather. We need artificial pitches, don't we? And we're seeing some of the clubs being proactive. Apia was one of the very first, wasn't it, to get out there and put an artificial pitch at what was Lambert Park. And I can remember how tough and how bare the grass was at Lambert Park in its heyday. So are we seeing more, don't laugh, are we seeing more and more artificial pitches being sort of prepared or considered, especially with this, tremendously treacherous weather that you saw, over the last 10 months?
Yeah, we are seeing more investment from government into what we're calling all-weather surfaces. That's a key at the moment, because when we saw all that rain recently, those with synthetic surfaces were able to play. Yeah. And that's such an advantage to clubs that have them, especially in terms of recruiting players. When you're trying to attract people to your club, those clubs with those surfaces and good facilities are going to start attracting more players than others. And it's absolutely vital that there is more investment from government. As you said, we see the investment that goes into AFL and into NRL clubs and facilities where NRL clubs train and play. And there does need to be more investment into football facilities for the size of the sport we have. It's not fair, the investment that goes into our game compared to others. And as you said, a key part of that is making sure that we've got pitches for people to play on, because especially in many parts of Sydney, there's not more land to find.
Correct.
We have to improve the facilities that we have, and that means synthetic surfaces, good change room facilities, and that will make the experience for the player so much more enjoyable, more enjoyable for a referee, for volunteers, and that's what keeps them in the game, George. That's what we need to keep people in the game, because as James Sutherland said recently, the CEO of golf, he said, we've got a national crisis coming if we don't get kids playing sport.
Yeah. I saw a tremendous documentary the other day, and it was about the Chicago Cubs and how they basically had to reconfigure and refashion the old Wrigley Field, which had been there 100 plus years. And they had an enormous opposition from just about everybody that you could imagine. And ultimately, they made some decisions. They took some punts. They gambled in some areas, and they got it done. But what they did, and what we see today, is that beautiful old, stadium has been given a whole new lease of life for the next 100 years. But what they've also done is they've used new technologies, new exciting developments like the Youssef parkland around what was a ground that had no more space, had certainly no car spaces and no parking available. So what did they do? They made it a special area, almost like a precinct for entertainment. So they brought, what did we see? We saw families and communities coming back and using the stadium for more than what it was intended for. And the same applies to Lambert Park. Apia doing some, hoping to do some wonderful things to shape the ground and also the surrounds in such a fashion that you come, and if there's no game there, the community can come and enjoy the ground anyway, or at least the amenities around the ground. And that's exciting too.
Yeah, as you said, they more and more sporting precincts have to become, 7-day-a-week entertainment precincts.
Spot on.
You have the O2 Arena in London. That has a cinema inside the foyer and shops and things like that. Like there has to be more than just a match day experience for those venues.
Well, I
suppose have to be able to provide a lot of things on non-match days.
Well, that's probably why they're spending all the money, and they can afford to spend the money because they know it'll come back to them many times over. And especially when the next elections are due, they'll go, oh, yes, they did the right thing by us. We'll support them. Or at least you hope so, don't you?
Absolutely. That's right.
What's next on the schedule, on the calendar? You've got an extraordinary competition going, as you touched on. We're not going to ask you to pick a winner because we know that's not fair. You're Mr. Neutral. But what's the next big event? You've got some international teams travelling around. I've got Crystal Palace playing at the MCG next month. What's happening in New South Wales, and are you guys involved?
I tell you what I'm looking forward to is the Matildas versus Canada on the opening week of the brand new Sydney Football Stadium. That is going to be an incredible night to see the Matildas play Canada as the first football match to be held at the new stadium. I mean, there's so much excitement over the new stadium, and this will be where the Matildas opening match of the World Cup's going to be. So the chance to get our first look at that and have the Matildas playing there is really exciting.
Is this the new 40,000 seater, the old sports ground, Allianz Stadium complex?
Yes, that's the one. So it'll be the home of Sydney FC, but for that night it'll be the home of the Matildas. So
goodness gracious. So what's the date? What's the date, Stuart?
I think it's in September. There's a week. There's an incredible lineup of 3 sporting events over 4 or 5 days to open it, and with the Matildas playing Canada being the highlight for me, that's for sure.
I was just going to say my great fear, and you know what I'm going to say to you. There'll probably be a rugby league game. There'll be a rugby union game, and you know what rugby union games do, don't they? They tear up the pitch because
you're right.
You got heavyweight packs all wanting to a piece of the action and the ball. And I've seen what happens to these modern pitches. I hate it with a passion.
Well, you're right, because there's a rugby league match then there's a rugby union match, and then the Matildas in the space of four or 5 days.
No, so put the Matildas first and run the others later.
Yes, exactly. So look, let's hope the pitch holds up fine that opening week, because it is going to be such a fantastic occasion. You know, so many people will want to come out and see the venue, see the Matildas. You know, we've got 1 year to go coming up in a few weeks.
Jesus.
I mean, how exciting is it? How exciting is it that we've got the Men's World Cup coming at the end of the year, and then, you know, 7-8 months later we have the home World Cup for the Matildas. It's going to be such an exciting period.
Cannot disagree with anything you've just said, and we wish you a fantastic end to the NPL season, and may we see some exciting matches with the Australia Cup, and bring on September.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot for having me.
Stuart Hodge from Football New South Wales, just giving us a sense of some of the excitement and some of the things that he's experienced over the last 24 hours, especially with the announcement of the draw for the Australia Cup and everything that's gone on with it. That's exciting stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, we're going to stay in New South Wales because
what have you got for me?
Joining us now, we previewed him before, but he's here now for us. Sydney FC captain Alex Wilkinson. Alex Wilkinson, a warm welcome to you. How are you enjoying your off season?
Yeah, well, it's pretty much over now. Thanks for having me, guys.
sorry for bringing it up.
I know. A bit
Alex,
of a sore point, actually. It's never much fun going back to the first week of pre-season. There's always a bit of running involved.
I think that's the decision.
Yeah, we're starting back tomorrow, so hopefully it's not too much of a shock to the system.
Mate, it's going to be a shock. But listen, you've been one of those rare players. You've been in the game 20 years. Is that right? Just the 20th year?
Yeah, about that.
20 years. And it
doesn't get any easier, mate.
I was going to say, I know it doesn't get easier, but you get smarter at doing what you need to do. I've always believed that's what experience does. And you've been in this game, if you take me back, you're young. You're 37 years young, is that right?
That's right, yep.
Northern Spirit, your first home. And we go back to 2002.
Feels like a long time ago now, but it was.
God. You know, I reflect on those 45 games that you played, and you didn't get on the scoreboard once. What the hell were you doing wrong?
Poor Alex.
Lucky. I haven't got on the scoreboard much since. So,
no, that's not true. Mate, your golden time on the scoreboard was when you went to Korea. You ended up with 3 goals, I think, at your time with Jeonbuk Hyundai Motors. You played, about 85 times, and you scored 2 or 3 goals. So you've had moments in the career when you've either snuck into the right spot on a corner or been right where you needed to be to put the ball in the back of the net. Have they all been with your head, or have you scored one with a foot?
Yeah, I've scored 1 or 2 with the foot, but most of them in the head. But like you said, it's usually just up from a corner, and lucky enough, the ball probably just hits me in the head. I don't do too much to usually get on the end of it. I'm not too prolific in that regard.
Listen, Alex,
lucky enough to score a few. I'm just lucky I don't get paid to score goals, mate. Otherwise, I would have been out of the game a long time.
You get paid an awful lot of money to make sure you make it very difficult for others to score. That's the idea of the captain of Sydney. Also, you've been the captain of the Central Coast Mariners at a time when that club was really competitive. You've had a time too at Melbourne City. You've been around the world. You've been around Australia, but you've been around the world. What have you learned in all that time, Alex?
Oh, look, I think you obviously learn as you go along. And the older you get and the longer you've been in the game, obviously you're still learning. And I'd like to think that I'm still learning now. I don't think you ever stop. And I think sort of when you stop learning and sort of stand still is when, other people can overtake you. So I think you're always learning, but it's been an unbelievable journey for me. I couldn't have asked for more in my football career to date. Like you said, I've been lucky enough to play for a few different teams in Australia, but also a couple overseas, and also, been lucky enough to play with the national team and travel around the world and play in some fantastic places there. So I count myself extremely lucky, and still really enjoying the game, and enjoying Sydney FC, and hopefully, looking forward to a not too hard pre-season and getting the season underway pretty soon.
Bless you, mate. I'm just going to say, you were talking about your days with the Socceroos. One of your teammates who has made quite an impression of late, I'm talking about, Andrew Redmayne. Does he practice all those special moves during practice sessions, or does he save them up for just the dance every other weekend?
No, yeah. He saves them up especially for the penalty shootout. So I'm assuming he does it at home in the mirror with his missus and his little one at home.
Tell me, what did you make of his contribution?
Oh, look, it was unbelievable. Look, I knew nothing about it like everyone else. You know, I was watching the game, and obviously come the 119th minute, they panned to him, and I couldn't believe it. I was like, wow. It's a big call, but it's also for Redders the perfect opportunity to go on because,
Correct.
in a shootout, all the pressure's on the takers. The keepers don't have anywhere near, I guess, as much pressure on them. And, Redders could just sort of go onto the pitch feeling free and having a wonderful chance of, being the hero and getting us through to the World Cup. And that's how it sort of played out. We've seen before that he's a fantastic penalty saver. He's a huge human being and he's got a great wingspan. So, when you're stepping up to the spot, and I've done it a few times in training, he sort of covers a lot of that goal.
I know.
It's quite intimidating. So,
that's what people don't readily give him enough credit for. He is a big unit. I can remember when he took over from Clint Bolton at Melbourne City. We all said, he's one big unit. And, my complaint, and I shouldn't complain, but I'd get frustrated with him occasionally when he was with us at City because he'd make that one solitary blooper and you'd go, no, he's much better than that. But since he came to Sydney, he's actually blossomed even more. We've seen a consistency to his game and we've seen him grow. And I don't mean physically. I just mean that his presence. And you as the captain, and you at the back, of course. You guys must have. Is it telepathic, or does it you can hear him calling?
Yeah, I think we've sort of developed that now. We've been playing together now for quite a while, a number of years, and the longer you play together, the more you get to sort of know exactly what sort of each other do and exactly what each other like. And I think just in terms of his game, like you said, I think it's gone to a new level over the last 3 or 4 years. And I think that's just down to confidence and, him playing a lot of games and having a great relationship with our goalkeeper coach, Matt Nash, and also the national team keeper coach in John Crawley, just giving him so much confidence in his ability and I guess the club as well, just backing him and really having that belief in him. And then obviously success that we've had at domestic level as well brings confidence as well. So he's just, like you said, taking his game to the next level. And now, hopefully, in a few months' time, he'll be going to a World Cup.
Goodness gracious. Yeah. That's fantastic.
It is.
Fantastic.
Look, Alex, the best thing about his unique penalty routine, as you were saying before, if he's dancing in front of the mirror or if he's got a night off from training and he goes out for a dance, he can call that training. That's
correct.
An extra session.
Yeah, put it on the book. Tell the tax man.
That's absolutely perfect for it. Hey, Alex, you were talking earlier about, obviously, not just your experience of being captain, but how you've learned different things across the journey. I want to ask you a little bit about your experience as captain of Sydney through last season. Obviously, it was a bit of a challenging season for the Sky Blues not making the finals, but what kind of a challenge did it throw up to you specifically as a captain, and what learnings did you take out of that year that you can put into the season ahead?
Yeah, look, last year was a really difficult year for our football club. I think, we've set some really, really high standards over the last 5 years, and we were nowhere near sort of living up to them last year. And it wasn't just one thing. I think there was a number of things that probably contributed to that. And I guess, look, as captain, I guess you've just got to sort of make sure that the boys are not getting too disheartened and down and just making sure the vibe throughout the whole place is still reasonably positive. It's difficult because, like I said, we've set some really high standards and we're used to winning games and being successful. And when you're not, all of a sudden it can be a bit of a shock to the system and people can get, pretty disappointed pretty quickly. But I guess last year as well, the schedule was a ridiculous one, and we were playing we played every 3 days for pretty much the whole season, saying we had to get our schedule in and then also get over to the Asian Champions League.
Correct.
And so it was important that we sort of kept the morale in the group high because, if you lose one game and then, everyone's a little bit down in the dumps and feeling sorry for themselves, before you know it, you got another game in 1 or 2 days. and that can affect the next performance. So I think it was just about sort of keeping the group as positive as possible. And, you know, up until I think, 3 or 4 games to go, we still had a chance of making the finals. But to be honest, we just weren't good enough last year, and we weren't consistent enough. We had some great results against some good teams, and then we also, you know, had some pretty average results, and we just couldn't get on that sort of run that we'd done in previous years where we just win, you know, 4 or 5 games back to back, and you end up shooting up a table that's very, very tight. We just couldn't manage that last year. So we've got a lot to improve on this year, and pre-season will be pretty important. So we're looking forward to putting in a better year this year.
Alex Wilkinson is our special guest on State of Our Football Nation on FNR. George and Lockie talking to Alex about the new season, which starts, of course, practice tomorrow. A brand new season, awaits us. We've got a Women's World Cup coming, which is going to be just awesome. You've got the main World Cup in November. So, as you say, a lot of things happening. There are touring teams coming to into the country over the next few months as well, getting ready for their new season. You've got a whole new list of players likely to arrive tomorrow at training, and because you've lost a bunch of players who have been a huge part of Sydney FC over the last few years, and we shouldn't forget you've had an era and a half of victory after victory after victory.
Yeah, it's like I said before, it's been a really, successful 4 or 5 seasons, you know, where you don't usually see it too much in the A-League in terms of a team being able to be right up there for that sort of amount of time. And it was a really enjoyable period, you know, and we like I said, we set some really high standards at the club, and they're ones that we didn't live up to last year. So this year's going to be hugely important for us. We're obviously going back to our new stadium.
That's right.
Out at Moore Park there, which is going to be fantastic. You know, we're really looking forward to getting back to that. And like you said, there's going to be quite a few changes in the playing personnel as well. We haven't had a lot of changes over the last 4 or 5 years. We've managed to keep a pretty steady core group of players together, and that obviously add, you know, a few new players here and there, which is normal. But this year there's going to be quite a bit of turnover, and we've got quite a lot of youngsters coming through from the academy, which is great. We've seen over the A-League as a whole that there's been youngsters popping up in teams all through the A-League and doing really well. It's just a matter of, you know, giving them time and giving them minutes, and a lot of them have proved to be hugely successful. So I'm sure we can have a few of them as well. And then obviously we've got a few more senior players to get in as well that I know the club are working on. So it'll be interesting to see what transpires over the next few weeks.
Alex, one of your young stars out of the academy has done very well at Melbourne City, Marco Tilio.
Yeah. Tills was with us for a couple of seasons before he went down to City, and obviously since he did really well for us actually as well. A couple of times when he came on, he scored a goal, I remember, against the Mariners, and you could tell he was an emerging talent. And then obviously down at City, he's grown and furnished into a fantastic young player he's just got that X factor about him. You know,
he's electric. He's electric.
He is. He's got that ability to come on and, you know, he's always positive. He's running at players and, trying to create things every time he gets the ball. And, you know, they're the types of players that we don't have too many of, I guess, in Australia.
Have we got anybody new like him coming up that we're likely to see this year at Sydney FC?
Well, actually, George, may I lead the witness just a little bit here?
Go on.
I've been watching a lot of New South Wales Premier League this season.
Go on.
And I wanted to ask specifically, Alex, about Jaden Kaczarski, because he is currently topping the goal scoring charts for the academy side. Have you had to do any defending against him in training? Because he looks red hot at
don't
the NPL
pick on
level.
the captain, for goodness sake.
Yeah, he's having a fantastic year in the NPL, and he's been training with us on and off over the last season or so, and it's great to see him just banging in the goals at the NPL level, and you can tell that he's just growing with confidence as the season sort of wears on. And as a striker, it's, you know, confidence plays a huge role, and you sort of just get on that roll, and everything's sort of working for him at the moment, and he's doing very well. And now obviously he's signed a scholarship deal with the first team, so he'll be in and amongst us as of tomorrow, I guess, full time, which is fantastic for him. And we've also got another one coming through in Segicic as well, who's been playing really well in the NPL. You might have seen he sort of plays out on the left wing or as a left 10, and he's been training with us now for a couple of years, and a great sort of player, similar to a Tilio type that loves to get the ball to feet, run at players and create things, but can also score a few goals as well. And I know he's been doing that in the NPL as well. So a couple of exciting talents.
Well, it's great to hear that there are exciting talents, that are pushing their way, wanting to make a name for themselves. But you've lost Ninkovic, you've lost young Amini, who's gone to Perth Glory. That's going to mean some big new faces in the dressing room, and that throws a lot of responsibility on the captain to, as they say, keep everybody relaxed, focused, and going forward in a manner that you guys have become very, very comfortable with over the last few years.
Yeah, and I think that's down as well to the culture we've got within the club and also within the change room. We pride ourselves on having a really fantastic culture at the club, and we're a playing group that really get on very well. And the club have been fantastic in that, when they're looking for players, they obviously look for great players, but they also look for good characters and good people as well, and people that are going to fit into that culture that we've created. And I think the club's done a really good job of finding those people over the last few years, and I'm sure that's what they're trying to do at the moment. We've obviously got a few foreign spots open, like you mentioned, with Ninkovic and Barbarousas leaving.
Yeah, Barber, yeah.
So I'm sure the club are obviously on the lookout for some foreign signings as well at the moment. But
we're hearing some strange noises about a guy called Cesc Fabregas. Have you heard anything about him?
Haven't heard anything, but that'd be nice.
Who does he play for?
Who does he play for again? Right. Might be. Alex, can I just take an opportunity to say thank you for being really patient with us. We wanted to get you up last week. We had some challenges here, but thank you very much for making the time and making yourself available. And we wish you every success, my boy. And if you see Redders, give him a huge hug from us and say, keep dancing, legend. Keep dancing.
I will. No, thank you, guys. Thanks for having me on. Much appreciated.
No worries at all. Alex Wilkinson joining us on FNR. It's been terrific to have both Stuart Hodge and Alex Wilkinson to give us a sense of the game in New South Wales, the game in Sydney, and what lies ahead for one of the teams that has made it its era over the last few years in the A-League. Sydney FC has been a fearsome opponent. They've won, with ease. They had some fearsome battles against Victory and against Adelaide and against City. I like to see now how they're going to come together. And I suppose, too, it depends on who they bring in through the door.
Absolutely.
Wearing the overseas marquee number.
Yes, that is one of...
Which is where we started the conversation.
The most important question. I mean, look, Sydney have been so dominant for so many years that it is easy to forget that they have had fallow periods before. I mean, even in the Del Piero era, which was right before Sydney sort of rose back to prominence, they didn't make the finals when he was around. So they have been down the bottom end of the table. And look, Sydney have got the sort of acumen on and off the pitch that you always expect that they will rise back up to the top. It's just a matter of when, not if. But
just reflect also, you got Macquarie hungry. They've got a new coach who was here at the beginning of the A-League. So the audiences are going to be very keen to see what he throws up and what sort of football Macquarie are going to play. You've got the murmuring now from Brisbane, as we touched on. You've got exciting times. Victory have made their own announcements now. We're hearing that Juric has come to join Popper. They've had some changes there too. They've got some young kids coming in with serious talent. So Victory looking like they're going to throw up some more challenges for the teams that want to win the competition. And you got Perth Glory, who had a miserable year recruiting youngster after youngster after youngster.
Well, and I think Stefan Kolakowski in particular, I think, could be primed for a breakout year, I guess, if you can say that.
You want consistency, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely.
You want, consistency of appearances in order to build.
Minutes, yeah. I mean, if he gets the platform, I really do think that he could have a standout season. But
I reckon Adelaide is lurking too. The makings. Do you reckon O'Halloran might come back to the Reds, or is he likely to go to another team like Sydney?
Well, Halloran's a possibility. I mean, Goodwin could also be back if you reunite that deadly duo. That could be some serious danger. But I mean, for Sydney specifically, it's almost cruel in Alex Wilkinson having to go back to training tomorrow and no rest for the wicked. Within 3 weeks, they've already got to play the Australia Cup against the Central Coast Mariners, which could be the Alex Wilkinson
And did I
derby.
mention that City have picked up a Dutchman out of the Eredivisie?
Yes. From the Go Ahead Eagles.
The Go Ahead Eagles.
My favourite team name in football, I think.
Right.
Pretty close.
Well, let's hope he leads City and makes them the Go Ahead City side. Wouldn't that be great?
Yes.
Time for us to go. Lockie, thank you very much for your assistance and your support. For those of you wanting to hear some more, if you've missed some of the program, it'll be available where?
Well, anywhere you get your podcast. Name your preferred podcast platform, your favourite one, be it Spotify, Apple, Pocket Cast is an obscure one that I like to throw in.
And just pull up State of Our Football Nation and you'll get a chance to hear what Stuart Hodge and Alex Wilkinson had to say, especially about Andrew Redmayne. And I thought that was some precious stuff. Can you imagine? He's sitting there and he's thinking, I'm watching the Socceroos play. What's this? Andrew, are you coming on?
I'm wondering if he dances in his sleep now.
We'll have to ask him. Listen, we'll have to get him on.
We should.
Before they go off to the World Cup. Thank you for joining us. More on FNR next week. You're listening